done that already, but it's good to be here. I'm not sure where Wilson you come from. Is it Malaysia?
Yeah,
Malaysia.
Yeah.
And we've got Timothy from India. We've got Sunday from Nigeria, and Jean from Feltham. So it's good that we're all together, isn't it? Wherever you've come from this morning. This time last week I was in India, and thank you for your prayers and your support while I was there. I hope one day to be able to show you lots of pictures. I've got 698 at the current count, but I won't inflict them all upon you. It's just a matter of sorting them out into things that might be interesting.
He has inflicted them all on me.
While I was there, there were still remnants of the festival of Diwali, great festival. Those were thankfully augmented by the Christmas tree in the hotel that I was staying in, that went up on the 25th of November, and I believe will come down on the 25th of January. So they go large for Christmas in India. Diwali, a festival celebrated by Hindus, Jains, Sikhs, Niwar Buddhists, although it marks different things for each faith. And Diwali is known as the Festival of Lights because houses, shops, public places are decorated with small oil lamps called diyas, or something like that. The festival represents the same symbolic victory of light over darkness, knowledge over ignorance and good over evil. The snag is that every one of those religions that I mentioned is based on false gods or pseudo-deities. Of course, as Christians, we would agree that light triumphs over darkness, and we've been encouraged by the many displays of the Christmas nativity when I visited India in late January. As I say, they're still up till the end of January, 25th anyway. It's encouraging to see the Christian witness to the true triumph of light over darkness when Jesus came to earth, especially when set against the huge Hindu majority celebrations. As we're early in the season of Advent, I want to look at a familiar passage which often forms part of traditional carol services. You may recognise it because we've already heard some of it. Good is good, isn't it? Christine had no idea what I was going to choose as a passage, so she chose the same one. I've got more verses. Let's look at Isaiah 9 then, verses 2 to 7. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as men rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. For unto us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. So I want to look at three things today, and I'm sorry, but I've chosen P as my letter for today, so, it's not got H for hope. But nevertheless, we've got P for promise. That's like hope, isn't it? P for person, and just to keep the theme going, I've got P for promise. Again, different promise. So let's have a look. We read at the beginning, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. There's no doubt that the times for God's people of Israel and Judah at the time of Isaiah's prophecy were dark. Worse was to come in the many years between Isaiah and Jesus' birth. Many were oppressed by rulers of foreign empires, and there was that overbearing sense of despair. The darkness of the shadow of death was the darkest misery of captivity. People were often put to death, even for minor misdemeanors. See, Israel had totally failed to appreciate the God who led them from Egypt into the promised land. They didn't only have human oppressors, but they'd fallen into the traps of the enemy, Satan. God had revealed himself as a pillar of fire in the darkness, but the people had chosen spiritual darkness through their own sinful ways. In despair, they cried out for a better future as they waited for the promised Messiah. So Isaiah speaks of hope, a new dawn, bringing revelation of God in the form of light. People would have been encouraged, would have to wait until the right time for the light to come. God's time for the prophecy to be fulfilled. I could have had a fourth P, couldn't I? Prophecy. But the promise is there. Jump ahead to verse 6 to see what the light coming would really mean. First Advent is described as, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given." The light is both his humanity as the human child and his deity as the Son of God. The coming dawn will be for the benefit of the Jews first, and then, thankfully, for the Gentiles. He came for us. So what can we learn from this? There's so much trouble in the world, isn't there? We hear even today of more attacks in Gaza, of the disturbances in Ukraine, bombing in Russia. There's an awful lot going on. And that's just the tip of the big iceberg. We may think of this as causing physical and emotional darkness by way of war, material poverty. We live in an atmosphere of spiritual darkness which pervades all of society. Isaiah's words of light, dawning, are equally relevant in each domain: physical, emotional, and spiritual. So in this season of Advent, we'll celebrate the coming of Jesus soon. The next part of the verse points to this first Advent, but it goes beyond the first Advent to a second Advent, because, lo and behold, Jesus is coming back. Much of what we see going on in the world around us are signs of his second coming. Isaiah's readers had to wait those 600 years for the first Advent. We will wait for a yet to be defined but indeterminate time for the second. But that's where the hope comes in. That's where the promise is. Jesus will return. He is coming again. The great advantage is that every Christian who has been born again of the Spirit has the presence of God within them every day. We don't have to wait for Jesus' coming to experience God in our lives. That's one up on Israel. We have the Spirit with us. He will reign as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. The promise of verse 6 is that the government will be on his shoulder. I thought about shoulders, and I looked at all the security guards at the airport, remember those big pointy sticks with the triggers on them? And then the normal police, and then there was the army, and all these people around, they all have these little marks on their shoulders, don't they? The sort of epaulets. Not epilepsy, epaulets of rank. and their allegiance. I notice the Navy now wear them around about here rather than on their shoulders, but whatever. It's a sign of importance, of relevance. But the Messiah's shoulder won't show a prestigious mark. Jesus had no need of that. The prophet Isaiah does foresee the government being, as it were, the yoke and the staff of Israel's oppressor. In Revelation, which describes Jesus' second coming, the insignia is the mark of the beast, which represents power and authority. But remember that the beast is defeated, and Christians are under the power of the one who bears not marks on his shoulders, but the marks of the cross in his hands and his feet. This aspect of prophecy will only be truly fulfilled when Jesus comes again. We jump across to Daniel chapter 7, verse 13. In my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like the Son of Man, coming with clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All peoples, nations, and men of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. Is that hope? Is that promise? That's Daniel's take on it. Jesus the Son shall receive the kingdom of the earth from the Father, who declares his Son as the heir of all things. So there's a promise. I hope that we have. But let's turn firstly to my glass of water. Croaky this morning. And we're going to turn to the person of Jesus. The rest of the passage that we were looking at describes Jesus' personal attributes. So we look at Wonderful Counselor. Now, in the version that we looked at, and in many, perhaps the majority of versions, you find that description, Wonderful Counselor. Some describe Wonderful Counselor, others split it into Wonderful, Counselor. I'm voting for the two-word version today, as it gives us a richer understanding of Jesus as a person. The word wonderful in this passage literally means incomprehensible. The word is much more meaningful than the way it's used in our normal conversation today. Christine was giving us examples of hope. Think about wonderful. Wonderful weather today. Well, actually it's not, but you know, it's an expression, isn't it? He's a wonderful preacher. Well, that's equally not true. It might mean a bit likeable. It could be a bit of a frustration. Oh, wonderful. You know, when your laptop that's projecting all the songs suddenly decides it's time for an update in the middle of what you're doing. Jesus is wonderful in a way that's mind-boggling. Jesus clearly demonstrated how wonderful he was during his lifetime through his miracles and teaching, his perfect life, his amazing resurrection from the dead. Incomprehensible how he could do that. But he was God. He was wonderful. The second part of Messiah's title is the word counselor. Now, in ancient Israel, a counselor was portrayed as a wise king. Now, you would think of Solomon giving guidance to his people. He was described as wise, at least in the early part of his reign. He was lacking a little bit towards the end. When he comes, though, Jesus will be the ultimate wise counselor, with detailed knowledge of his people John 2:25 tells us he did not need any testimony about mankind, for he knew what was in each person. He was able to advise his people thoroughly because he is qualified in ways no human counsellor is. Colossians 2:3 tells us, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. That includes knowledge of all human nature. Jesus always knows where we're going, what we're going through. He always knows the right course of action. He is the wonderful. He is the counsellor. And if we link those two words, Christ's position as our wonderful counsellor means, firstly, that we can trust him with our problems. He will guide us in the right direction. We can be sure that he is listening because he told us to pray to him about our worries. Thirdly, we can be certain that he has our absolute best interests at heart because of his wonderful love for us. His love is so wide and deep and wonderful that we can't fully understand it. If you want to check me out, I'll give you Bible verses to back up each of those statements. So, wonderful, comma, or not, counsellor, mighty God. The child to come is described as mighty God. God had already demonstrated his power over many enemies, but the pace of growth of his kingdom will increase as Christ, as a child, is given. Emmanuel, God with us. For now we wait in anticipation of Almighty God's forthcoming victory. We know that at the second coming, God will continue to be the mighty God as he demonstrates his supreme power over the prince of darkness, leading to Satan's world, total destruction. He will then reign for all eternity. Those who have committed their lives to him on earth will be with him forever in the new creation. Mighty God, everlasting Father. As one commentator puts it, the Father or source of eternity. He is truly wonderful as a child, yet the everlasting Father. How can he be both? Well, Jesus told us in John 10:30 that he and the Father are one. So he can be wonderful Father as well as the Son. Earthly monarchs, of course, leave their people after a short reign, even if it is as long as our late Queen. Jesus will reign over and bless his people forever. They don't have numbers big enough. And do you know how big a Google is? Google isn't just a search engine. It's a huge number of zeros. Google it and find the answer. That's how long Jesus will reign. Googles and Googles of years. The promise is not simply for those chosen people of Israel. Eternal himself, he offers eternal life to those who believe in him. How? By accepting the Christ who came to die on a cross. So what's the next one? Wonderful Counsellor. Prince of Peace. Yeah, it's got it written down here actually. In a world filled with war and violence, it's difficult to see how Jesus could be the all-powerful God who acts in human history and be the embodiment of peace. But physical safety and political harmony are not really the kind of peace that he's talking about. The Hebrew word for peace, shalom, is often used to point to an appearance of calm and tranquility. But the deeper meaning of peace is spiritual harmony, brought about by an individual's restoration with God. This is a primary reason for the child to come. Shalom is what Jesus said he would leave for those who commit to him. Just before he was crucified, he told his followers, "Shalom I give you, my peace." Peaceful, of course, doesn't mean easy. Jesus never promised easy, but he did promise help. In fact, he told us to expect tribulation and trials. These will especially mark the time before his glorious return. Remember that he also said that if we call out to him, he will give us the peace of God which surpasses all understanding. No matter what hardships we face, we can ask for a peace that comes from the powerful love of God. It is not dependent on our own strength or on the situation around us. Ultimate peace will come when we live with the Prince of Peace in the new creation. Until then, we can be assured that his government will be far-flung, peaceful and endless. It will reach as far as Malaysia in one direction, as far as Santiago, sort of diametrically opposite, I guess. Far-flung, peaceful and endless. His princely rule shall perpetually increase and be unlimited. As Daniel would later prophesy, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. All those Googles of years. Sitting on the throne of David, the wonderful Counselor, the mighty God, the everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace, will rule with judgment and justice. Why? Well, the Lord's zealous and jealous care for his people will make this happen. That's what it says at the end of our reading. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish it. God is always working with enthusiastic vigour. Just for clarity, let me give you some alternative words for zeal. You might say great energy, enthusiasm, passion, ardour, devotion, relish, gusto, vigour. God is all of these, yes, and more, because of his love for each of us to whom he's brought light. So I promised you 3 P's. It's cheating a little bit because the third one was the same as the first one. Promise. The prophecy refers to 2 stages in which God reveals himself as the great light. The first stage is here on earth as spoken by Isaiah. Jesus showed us that change was possible. It led to his death, where many thought the light had gone out. But it hadn't, as it led to Christ's spiritual victory over Satan as he rose from death. The second promise then is the promise of a second coming, which will bring final victory with judgments on the Antichrist and every enemy. So as we journey through this season of Advent, as we light the candles, let's rejoice, because unto us a child has been given. Let's rejoice that the same child is now on the throne, and that we will experience the ultimate peace of his government when we join him at his second coming. And that's God's greatest promise. I'm going to a wonderful place. I'll see you there. I'm going to a place where the streets shine.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope that you found that sermon helpful and would like to join us again on another Sunday. In the meantime, you'll find resources available at our website, on YouTube, So please do take the opportunity to have a look, but let's hope to see you soon. God bless you.